What's up, guys? Welcome to Modern Craftsman Monday.
We still know. John's been taken off early, so we're missing one of the singing.
So, a little behind the scenes, guys. We do our intro at the end, so we know what we should introduce the show to.
Yeah.
Oh, you know.
We'd have to be psychic to do the...
Imagine.
You know, to talk about the show, the intro
one
before
cut
it.
all the way through.
We'd really have to...
Actually,
we could do it if we had everything in order and really had our crap together, because we could... Hey, this is what we're going to talk about on this podcast, and then actually talk about that, but we're not that.
Yeah, but we can't give like a cliffhanger.
No,
like today's week, today's episode.
Unless we set ourselves up for it and then just left the cliffhanger.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. That's super
It'd be tough,
smart.
though. I don't think we could. No, but we do. We do it at the end. We
do. Which is why John's not here. Last week, lacrosse for him. No guests this week. Had some scheduling. Well, actually, it doesn't matter why. We don't have a guest this week. Just the three of us. You guys like when we talk amongst each other. But this week, our cliffhanger will be why you should raise your prices. And be only doing the jobs that you enjoy.
Yeah.
You like that one?
I think so. I'm hanging.
Right.
I'm on the precipice. What's the podcast going to be about? I can't wait. Why? Tell me why.
I have to listen.
You'll have to wait, listen, and find out.
All the way through.
Yep.
I'm not even going to tell you the timestamp.
It's a secret.
Mainly because I don't know it.
Just wait.
Guys, this podcast is brought to you by Duration Moulding and Millwork. So you have a print calling for a James Hardie Artisan Siding, and you just found out they discontinued the line. What to do? Do what others are doing and move that specification over to Duration. Longer lengths, no required edge sealing, no clearance restrictions, easy and safe to work with, complementary moldings, and the authentic look of wood siding. And if you need a special reveal or profile, that's not a problem either. To learn more about Duration Polyash products, please visit their website at durationmillwork.com and be sure to check them out on IG. What else are we talking about today?
I don't know. I like the word avoidance.
Avoidance. Why do you like that word?
Because I feel like it's something that I've watched people do a lot of, and it aggravates the piss out of me. And at the same point.
So you don't like the word?
No, it's a trigger.
Or you like to talk about it?
No, I feel like it's something we should talk about. That's why I posted on it the other day, because it was on my mind. Because some of my guys do it, and sometimes I do it, and I have to like force myself to do the things that I'm trying to avoid.
All right. What's the story?
It's actually funny you say that. So I was getting tattooed a couple of weeks ago, and the building that it's in, it's my buddy Pat. He owns a shop. It's called Forever Valentine. It's in this old school building in South Philly. That school basically got shifted elsewhere. This, I guess this younger lady, her parents bought it for as like a real estate venture, and it's basically 3 stories, like a city block. It's huge, and they basically rent it out to like all startups, and then a lot of like artistic and design companies, freelancers. So everyone just rents this space in the building, but you walk in and it's an old school. Like the lockers are still there, the bathrooms are all the same. Cool. It's actually super cool, but I completely forgot. Like I went to go take a piss, and then I'm walking back to the tattoo shop, and when you used to walk down the hall and there'd only be 2 people in the hallway, and it's like, do I look at them? Do I ignore them? Do I say hi? Do I like pretend I don't see them till you get to this certain point? And I was brought back to my entire academic career, where I would just be cruising the hallways and be like the only person in the hallway with somebody else, and be like, this is so awkward. I just want to turn around and like walk the other way. That's definitely avoidance. I completely forgot about it, and then I'm like back in a school building doing the same thing, feeling like I'm 16. It's like, this is terrible right now.
So what'd you do? You ignored him?
I just kept my head down until like we were really close to each other, and then said hi, and then kept walking, thinking how awkward it was.
It's awesome.
It's like you turn the other way and you like start counting the cinder blocks. Like, what do I gotta do? 1, 2, 3, 4.
I feel it always was something that just made me very uncomfortable. It's like I guess I mean, it makes sense. It's why I don't like having neighbors, and I didn't enjoy having neighbors because I didn't want to go outside and be like, "Hey, how's it going today? How was work?" I just want to get up, go to work, not see anyone. I don't like the small talk and then passing somebody in the hall like, "Hey, how's your day going?" No, I'd just rather not talk to you. Keep moving ahead.
I think that's why it's always funny that you're like the most antisocial social media guy of the bunch, and I appreciate I'm the same way. Like sometimes you want to be an introvert, and just like if I coach, you want to say hi to all the parents, blah blah. There's just days, man, where I'm cooked. Like I had to drive myself to get here with everything else going on with work. Then I'm gonna pull it together, coach the kids, but I'm not gonna shoot the shit with you, and I'm probably just gonna look at my phone, even though there's nothing on. I do it all the time when I go to Home Depot. I'll put my headphones in, and I won't be playing anything. It's just so people don't approach me.
I'm totally the type that if I see somebody, I turn the other way. We went out to breakfast on Sunday, and I walked in, and my wife's like, "There's so-and-so," and it's somebody from high school. And I just was like, all right, I'm not going to say anything. And I just sat down and completely ignored her that she said it. And then the girl's like, "Hey, Rachel and Tyler," and I just kept on ignoring it. And then it got to the point where I couldn't anymore. And I was like, "Oh, hey, how's it going? I'm going to turn over here and sit here and not talk to you." I don't have anything to say, and I don't want to. The small talk isn't really for me.
It depends on the day for me sometimes.
Yeah,
but that,
it is funny that it's like and it's also. I remember seeing this video of these two guys throwing a baseball back and forth, and someone was filming them from a distance. And he's like, these are two guys that neither one of them want to admit that they want to stop throwing the ball. And it's like, and he yells out, and he goes, "Both of you guys want to stop throwing the ball, just stop." And they both said, yeah, he's right. Yeah, I kind of want to stop. I want to stop playing catch. But it's like small talk where it's like you don't, neither one of you want to say, like, just turn around, because then you feel rude. But it's like if you turn around for like more than 5 seconds, the other person's like, "Oh, okay. Yeah. I didn't want to keep talking." It's like it's almost like it's not acceptable, like to both agree that you guys don't have to talk.
Yeah, that's pretty much same thing as getting my hair cut. Same principle. Just don't want to do it. But I don't think that's the avoidance that you're talking about.
No, it's all kind of similar. I just think it's a different context. You know, whether it's billing or dealing with. I feel like nowadays there's certain things. I guess I learned it when I went through the lawsuit with my old boss. Is like you have to almost unplug and plug back into a different, mindset. So there's some days where like you have a client that owes you money, per se, and everything else is going good that day. Like all your subs are great, everything is good. You have to force yourself to unplug from that good time to plug back into this. Let me set this straight. Let me document this. Let me get an email off that is driving home a point that makes sense, or reiterate a whole conversation, or put it into context for an attorney. And some days it's like, yeah, I'm all for that. And there's other days where I have to force myself, for an example, where it's like, how do I do that? It's the same as like if you do manual payroll or whatever it is. That's why we kind of delegate certain things like that for me. Like I have to delegate doing craftsmanship and carpentry, but I would love to be able to do more of that. But like bookkeeping, cost to completes, all that stuff, sometimes we joke about it and like you go make sawdust, but there's sometimes where I just stay on site too long, where I've, what do I want to say, unconsciously avoided making time to get to the office.
Yeah. We had, speaking of payments, we had in the meeting, or in last week in our office meeting, we were talking about some billables that we had, and they're like, "Is this warranty?" I'm like, no, it's not caused by the workmanship going in, and it's not covered by the manufacturer, so it's not warranty. But then I go back and forth where it's like, you know what, it's not that big a deal, just don't bill them. And then an hour later, I'm like, what am I doing? And it's like, why am I avoiding? I'm avoiding bill, and it was for a difficult client that we had in the past. And finally, I was like, no, there's no reason that we wouldn't bill this. The only reason I'm saying not to bill this is because I don't want to deal with the potential phone call that he's going to call and say, "Why are you billing me for this? Isn't this under warranty?" And I was like, you know what? bill it. Swear to God, invoice went out. 30 minutes later, paid. And I was like, that feels so good. It's like, why I know it's not going to always. Yeah. Why did I overthink it? And it's the same in, and last, we do monthly draws for our clients. And last month, Nicole, who runs my accounting, I was like, hey, how'd it go this month? She goes, smoothest month ever. And it was the first month that I wasn't involved. I let everyone else kind of roll with it. And I was like, fair enough. I know what I shouldn't be, involved with. I trip up over things. I get too emotional about things. And right after that, Rachel, who runs our maintenance stuff, I was like, hey, how's the maintenance? She goes, everything's getting done this week. It's like, once you told me not to deal with you and deal directly with the guys, everything's been getting done, and I'm like, all right, I'm literally not needed in any of these circles here today. But it is. I think, as owners, we avoid things because of the potential uncomfortable outcome. When, we're judging that on the 10% of uncomfortable outcomes that we have, rather than the 90% of, either normal or positive outcomes.
It's probably pretty similar to life. Like, how much stuff do you put off, or how many things do you not say, or how many situations do you, avoid, for lack of a better term, because you're anticipating one thing or another, and then you end up doing them, and you're like, well, you know what, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, you build it up. It's huge. It's like writing down an estimate or a quote. It's like, I got to do that. It's going to take me 6 hours. And you make this compounded effort to make it bigger than what it is, and you sit down and you crank it out in an hour and a half. It's like, dude, all right. And then you get in this little kind of window, and you just do them all. And you update everything, and you're like, I'm going. And then you find yourself in this whole little rhythm that you had to, like I said, again, plugging into it. It's definitely doable once you're in that motion. It's just some days, I've been there 100 times where I'm like, all right, every day, wake up. What are you going to avoid today? Like, what is it? And I think that's what's great about, bi-weekly or weekly client meetings, is that it makes sure that you can't avoid stuff for too long. Whether, even for them, if they're not making a decision, having that conversation with them about not making a decision. It's that bi-weekly or weekly is just, it's accountability that is built in. Hey, did I get that tile sample? Something stupid. It's so easy to do, but, it's, I'm trying to think of what I'm avoiding right now, and it's really not. That's, I guess, one of my driving home points is just, for me every day, is what could you avoid? That's what you should focus on first, and then all the other stuff's easy picking. I just make a list every week, almost every day. My notebook's in my truck, but.
Do you guys get to the point where you haven't done something where there's a threshold where you're like, I'm just not going to do it at this point and wait for them to reach back out because anything I say is going to be an excuse? I think sometimes I'll have emails that'll sit, and if I don't get to them at a certain point, I think to myself, I'm just going to wait until they get back a hold of me and think, say, completely dropped off my radar.
Active project
open the conversation back. Anything, anything. If somebody gets a hold of me and I'm like, it's on my list of things to do, and I don't get to it within a certain time period, then I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to pretend like I forgot about this, and when they get a hold of me, I'm going to tell them I forgot about it, because it's like, at this point, for me to get back to you 3 weeks later, I feel like it looks better for me just to be like, hey, it dropped off my radar. I didn't see it at all, rather than, hey, sorry it took so long to get back to you 3 weeks later. It's the first time I'm sitting down.
Well, it's tough. You can always use, I use my notebook. It's like, hey, going through my list. Or let's say the easy one is like, let's say you did some pre-con for a project. Like we mowed some lawns for the client while it was kind of overgrown and they were waiting for the historic thing. And we did asbestos, testing. And it's like that never got built. And then we decided to walk from the product. But I'm like, end of the year, tie out. Hey, cleaning up our books. Like you find this kind of, like it should have gone out. It's been on my list week to week, but it rolls over because it's just something that's not active, and it's maybe $1,400. But it's like, all right, how do I? Like I've written it down on my other notebook. It's in the truck. It's like, all right, I have 3 of those. That's probably worth $6,000 to be like, hey, tying out the
Right.
books, get it done. So I have to tell myself a story.
And you don't. It's like you then question it. It's like, do I look unprofessional and apologize for the fact that this is, way too late, or do I eat it? And I think a lot, it's like that's the mental side of it. And same thing, we had a couple months ago, we had finished a job months prior, and we did a tie out on the job, and I'm like, why are we were like $8,000 shy on that job. I'm like, how did we not make money on that? Oh, you guys never billed the additional work that we did after the fact. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be really bad at doing that, so I'm going to blame accounting.
Yeah.
And let's have you write the email because I won't ever collect.
That's what I used to do, and say, hey, say there's like a Janice.
What's your fake girl's
Janice,
name?
whatever it was. Yeah,
Janice,
whatever.
yeah.
It's like, hey, send it off and just write. Like I used to always tell the bookkeepers, even companies I've helped run, is like, don't sign it. Just say accounting. I don't need you to have a name.
Right.
I'm being rude. Just
100%. And it's like they're going on your website. Where this is Janice. I got to see what this.
But I
shit
think
looks like.
I don't know how I came up with it when I was younger. Was that I thought, and I still do, even like a previous owner, like when it's all about you, people want to take shots at you, and when it's successful. But if you make it around a team, then there's less of a chance of people to take a jab.
100%.
So it's like if I can say, hey, Janice or whatever, she's wrapping up the bill. It's like my notebook.
Yeah.
I always deflect a lot of stuff because I take things very personal, and it's tough for me to negotiate with myself, when it's just business. Instead of me going, dude, why would they negotiate that 1%? Like, do they not like me? Did I do something wrong? And in reality it's just that's a game they play. They're going to ask until someone says no. And that's tough for me to do when this is my life. Like,
and that's really what, there's 2 parts of this that I really like. And one is me focusing, like, very much this year has been all about our management style and putting the people in place to succeed at. John, you told me about the disc surveys that we've done and really understand like where people's strengths are, but also realizing that what are the bottlenecks in the company, and oftentimes the bottlenecks are us. The guy, the owner of the company, in the sense that my PMs aren't getting the information because I'm bottlenecking it. Where it's, and I'm bottlenecking it because I'm avoiding it. And I'm avoiding it because I don't like doing that part of my job. And it's, and so now it's about hiring people to fulfill that role. So it's not a bottleneck, and they have the support. So I can then focus, I can double down on what I'm good at and what I enjoy.
yeah.
Thus, moving the needle. The other part of it is, what I've said, I feel like I've been talking about a lot, is that, we oftentimes look at situations, as worst case scenario. And I've used the extreme example of, what's the worst that could happen? And the worst that could happen is, sure, I lose my business, I get sued, I get put out of business, I lose my house, like all of that, like that, those, it's all terrible. My guys have to go find another job, I lose all my, like, all of that is terrible, but it's also worst case scenario. And that's typically what our mindset seems to revolve around, is worst case scenario. Where it's like, okay, best case scenario, I buy 8 homes and a mega yacht. Well, that's probably not likely either. But there's somewhere in between. And that's, and the more I talk about it out loud, the more I realize that when I'm in a situation that sucks, and I'm focusing on the worst case scenario, going back to that Harvard Business Review book, like focusing on problems instead of opportunities, that's what, I start realizing is that, yes, this sucks. Yes, this could ruin me. Yes, like I could lose my house. Yes, but I could also not lose my house. And this could also be a point in my career that I look back on and realize that was the moment that you realized that you had to change something, and you did, and you hired that person, and that person allowed you to be more efficient, and being more efficient, you were able to grow the company.
I think it's all perspective. I think for me, I know that the positive thing is always there, and it should go that direction, but I prepare myself for the negative, not worst case. And like I posted about avoidance, and someone was like, hey, we're not like dying, curing cancer and stuff like that. I'm like, I get it. I get every day, but it's like at the same point, it's like, all right, what's the worst thing that's going to happen today? All right, who can I give that to? Is it a sub? Is it one of my guys? Should I just send an email now and get over it? I think for me, it's the guys trying to set that example. So there is way too much on my plate on a given day, and it's really trying to set the right tone for each person so that the way they know, how to structure an email. Let's just put it that way. Like when you have a client meeting and I take my notes and it's like, hey, here's a brain dump. Like I had this conversation last week. It's like, hey, I need more out of you. If this is your role as a PM, I need more out of you. And I don't know if it's avoidance. I don't know if it's that you're not getting to these things or whatever. And it's like, so like I'll CC him on an email at midnight that I'm sending out because it's like, hey, this still has to go out. This is how I'm dealing with this. Not saying do this. It's like, you're not even on this job, but here's the breakdown I'm giving a client. Like, write an email as if it's going to your wife or your mom. Just have a discussion, clarify stuff as if it's your mom or your wife. Like that's what I think about every day, and it's just trying to get that across because at this level I think execution should also be assumed, like the positive outcome, but it's how you get there. And I think experience, Nick, you've said it a couple times now, like you said about what's the worst, my company dissolves and blah blah, but I think at the same token I value so many companies that say established like 1979. For them to stay in business, that one tagline is so critical because I know that they've probably been on that Tobin Bridge many a time in their head, or they've been on a high where, dude, everyone's paying and they're on the plus side, and they're not. We're not a bank, but at any given time we're funding projects.
And I don't want to diminish that point at all because there's no part of me that doesn't value that. And I know that's not what you're saying, but just to clarify, I'm not looking at it as whatever, I lose my company and my guys lose their job, like big deal. It's not really that mindset that what I'm getting at. The mindset is that the likelihood of that happening is a lower probability than it being neutral.
I think it's the same as if you get on a roof and go, I'm going to fall off this roof. I'm going to break my arm. You're going to walk around on that. You're going to fall off like the roof on all fours and not get anything done. But as soon as you stop thinking about that and you start banging out what your scope of work is, you're on the ground. It feels like.
Of course, it's just the higher up you are, the more you think about the fact that you're going to fall. Like if that roof was on the ground and it was something that they craned up and put on after, you wouldn't even think about the fact that I could fall off this. But that's a perfect analogy where it's when you're thinking about the fact that you're going to fall off it. Yes, you're either going to walk around on all fours and not get anything done, or you're going to literally fall off it because your mind is almost tricking you into being, you're going to trip over yourself because your mind is playing games with you.
It's the same as sports. It's like if you go in and think you're going to get hurt. Like I tell my boys, any given time they go in things and they're not optimistic at all. They're more cautious about what's going to happen, and they think that the other team is better. Like my youngest did it at soccer this past week, and they scored 2 goals, and you could see him just shut down. And I'm like ready to throw my chair in the sky and be like, dude, why the fuck did we drive here? Like, I'm not going to sit here and watch you walk around a field. And then this team started scoring, and then they went up, and it's like, all right, I need you to have unbridled confidence on the field. Not like obnoxious, but when you until you're proven otherwise, you are the best player on the team, and have that motivation and that kind of swagger, arrogance. I want to throw out because that can be withheld, but that's what you have to do, and it's the same as business. If you're going to go on the roof, do it. And I think what you're trying to say, and what I've kind of worked around, is that go into business, enjoying the good stuff, but knowing that hey, this could happen. It's like you don't want to start roofing a house with no harnesses and all that stuff. Know what the safety precautions are. Same as business. It's like have an attorney. Don't just fly by the seat of your pants. But focus on the positive.
Yeah, don't wait for something to happen, but be prepared, but not not wake up every day, be like, all right, is my attorney still alive? Let me check in with him real quick, just in case something happens.
It's a great. Today. I just did the other day. I was like, a client asked me, hey, can we revise 2 things on the contract? Like, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, yeah. And I'm like, I never sent it to my attorney. for like the.
Right.
So then I did it, and he had it like, I'll pay you tomorrow. I emailed the client back, have it tomorrow. I'm like, why did it take a week? Like, I'm at this desk saying that to myself. Like, I should put a mirror right here and be like, what the fuck? You know, just look at myself. I swear to God, like, I have so many lists to get done, and I'm like, and it's the same thing is that if there's not a sense of urgency, like the client's getting funding, and I'm like, well, they haven't got the funding yet, so. But now I'm more like, it's the same as a job. Let's just kick it back to a project. Let's say something gets held up on a project. Let's say it's tile didn't show up or whatever, or HVAC didn't get their permit. And it's like, well, does that mean you stop work on the whole product? Like you don't install the siding, or you don't start doing the flat work on the outside for the patio, or wherever you are on the outside. That's why I always try and say, and it happens. We have PMs, we've had two of them, where as soon as something, they go, all right, if I'm running 2 jobs, that one's not just dead to me, but I don't need to do anything because I'm waiting. I'm waiting on everything. Yeah. But what happens when they get that, like tomorrow the HVAC guy gets his permit, now they're on you. You got to get everything you could possibly get done, get everything ordered so it's never on you. That situation happened, but you're still teed up. You're now moving to the outside, getting all the stuff done, getting paint prepped, so you're rolling. And it's the same as at the outside. We're doing a project and we're waiting on utility approvals. I'm like, get the rear patio in, get the whole backyard loaned,
right? Get
it all power raked, and then leave it so the front is the only thing left over. So now Friday we get utilities in, done. You loam the front, you binder the driveway, and then the place looks done. You're doing irrigation and sod next week. But if you waited for the whole yard, we're 2 weeks out from that. So it's just having a sense of urgency again, but not avoiding it and going, all right, well, I don't need to focus on anything outside, and I'll get to it when that's my trigger to get me to do stuff on the outside. And I think that's where I think avoidance happens, where people are like, well, I don't have this yet. Doesn't mean you, like, let's say I don't have cabinets getting delivered this day. It doesn't mean you don't call a Gale and set up the appliance delivery. I like to set a point and then come back. Like a client asked us the other day, like, hey, what are we doing for carpet downstairs? And my guy's like, oh, I'm going to measure it out. I'm like, to me, that whole thing smells of avoidance. Like, I go, this is me. You guys can tell me if I'm wrong. I go, email the client back and say you're going to have measurements done Monday. This is on a Friday. And he goes, but I haven't done it yet. I go, but now you're forcing yourself. You've anchored yourself in that situation to make sure you make the fucking call, whether it's now or Friday, Saturday, or whatever it is. Dude, but if you don't do that, make that move, and I know you're lying to the client, but the only way to make that not a lie is if you do X, Y, Z between now and then. Otherwise, Monday, you got to come to Jesus with yourself and go, hey, I didn't do that. And I said I was going to, because how else do you hold yourself accountable? Me walking around going, you fucked up, you fucked up. That's not going to, that's no room for improvement.
I mean, that's even as far as, I mean, for me, one of the hardest things is when can you get a start date? It's date. Can you get a start date? Or can you squeeze this in between projects? And unless somebody says you need to get here on this date, or hey, can we put you on the calendar for this date? It's just, that's like, there's no definitive end, or there's no way I'm going to make that happen unless it's like, you have to put this on your calendar for this date. If I don't schedule it, I'm going to take another job and then I'm going to fill something else in. But if I tell a customer, hey, I'm going to be out there next Wednesday, then it's like, I have to, if I tell them, hey, I'll get to you when I finish this next project, then I don't really have any incentive or motivation to get there other than finishing this project. If I'm like, hey, I'm going to scoot out and get to you Wednesday, then you have to do that. You have to get everything that you need to done. It's like scheduling a sub. Hey, when are you going to be ready for us, the electrician? If I'm like, hey, I can give you, I'm thinking this date range, but if I say, hey, I'm going to get you in at the 9th, then it's like I have to have everything done before the 9th.
But if you tell him...
And it kind of... It lights a fire under you, and it holds you accountable, because now it's not just your schedule, it's your electricians, it's the labor that he brings or she brings along with them, and it is that accountability where, hey, I have to make this happen now no matter what. I told him the 9th, and maybe you have a little bit of give here and there, but if you're just like, hey, you know what, I'm thinking like a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, then you don't really pin yourself down to a date, and you're not going to be accountable.
In my
to
opinion,
that.
they also don't think that's a serious date. So
Of course.
they're not even on the calendar at that point. And
And when you don't hit that date, it's like there is this sense of like you can do two things. You can avoid it and wait for the client to reach back up. Like, hey, I thought you were. I'm thinking right now I have a deadline due tomorrow, and it's like, man, I got a lot of work to do between when we finish this podcast and tomorrow. But it's I have the choice of getting it done, or putting the tail between my legs and saying I didn't get it done, or avoiding it.
So what's your deadline to send an email to be like, hey, okay, if you're, let's just not say that example, but let's say you're now late for a meeting. When do you send, like, is it like, if it's
usually, if I'm late for a meeting, I let them know ahead of time.
So nowadays with text, I think people joke around about it and go like, if I have to text a restaurant and be like, hey, we're going to be late, it doesn't make it any better. Like, it's like, if it's at 20 minutes, like I look at my watch and go, that's like I always do the GPS when I'm at a meeting. And if I'm 25 minutes out, I want to be able to tell people then that I'm going to be late. If not, it's like that window within 25 minutes and 5 minutes out. It's like, dude, you already knew.
Yeah, I think it's dependent on what it is too. If it's like I'm thinking this morning I had a 8:15 call, and I dropped my daughter off at school, and I drop her off at 8:10. But I'm literally running 3 minutes late. So I'm like, all right, that's going to be tight for me to hop on that call. I got to get her out of the car, bring her to the door. So I just, that was like last minute, like, hey, I'm going to be like a minute or two late. I'll give you a call once I get back in the truck. But if I'm headed to a meeting and I'm driving somewhere, that the moment you put that Waze on and it tells you, if you're going to be there at 2 and it's like 2:05, I'm going to be 10 minutes late. And I feel like I'm giving advice on how to tell some you're going to be late, but it's like, I'm going to give myself an extra 10 minutes, but and letting them know ahead of time, because I don't know. I think it's, regardless of the importance of the meeting or what someone might say, when someone is late, there is undoubtedly the subconscious feeling of they don't value my time, and the fact that he's 1 minute late, or he's here exactly at the time he said he was. It's like, why wasn't he early? Why wasn't he here waiting for me? Like, why am I waiting on him? And it's not, and I don't think it's a thought that a lot of people have like consciously. I think it's just a subconscious thought.
It all depends on, for me, if people can be late for me all the time. It's just like, if you're 2 hours late, then this meeting should never happen. But if it's like, that's 10 minutes, I get that we're all hustling and traffic's crazy. Totally. So it's like I'll break open a laptop or whatever. Of clients, I give them the benefit of the doubt 100 times over.
It's funny. I read a book about meetings. I think it was called Meeting Suck or something like that. And it might be the wrong one I'm referencing, but it talked about how meetings, no matter what, should always start on time. And if those people aren't there, if someone's not there on time, then screw them. They absolutely have to be there on time. And I think about our production meeting, and I did that for a couple weeks, where it's like right at 3:00, start of the meeting, and like 3 people wouldn't be there. Like, are we waiting for them? Nope. And I'm like, hey, you know what? This doesn't really work, because they need to be here for the meeting, and they're probably stuck in traffic because they were getting shit done on the job site and then headed to the office to meet.
It's so funny. Like, for practices, like, if you do that, you have 50 minutes on the ice, and if I take 10 minutes to just shoot pucks and then start it, it's like, dude, I would kill for that 10 minutes. It's the same as like a project. If you let it, the beginning of the project, if you don't start it with a sense of urgency, you're gonna wish you had those hours, days, and months back. So it's weird. Like, I am casual about meetings and people being late, but then again, when I'm running a practice or a sports thing, it's like, no, if I act casual, then everyone assumes it's casual and they can show up whenever they want. But if I start practice and they show up and go, oh shit, it's in their court to understand that they need to be on time. I'm not going to scold them, but it is weird.
But it is dependent on the situation
and the people.
Yeah.
So avoidance. What do you think people avoid that we have in our circles, like subs, employees? What do you think their biggest avoidance is?
Money. It's always money. I think in every facet of what we do. Our trades don't bill. They avoid sending invoices. They avoid asking for more money. They avoid asking for more money. We, as builders, as contractors, we avoid asking our clients for more. I think all of this avoidance revolves around money in some sense. And I think it's because it's oftentimes the leading
instigator.
Constraint. The leading constraint for the project. Where it's like, this is my budget. And oftentimes the budget trumps everything, So it's, when we run into something and it should be more work, it's like I question whether we should bill the client for it. And there's times when, we should bill the client, and then there's times that we shouldn't. And when we should, then it becomes this emotional thing of like, well, I feel bad because I told them it was only going to take this long, and maybe I underestimated, and we get into this emotional cycle, and it's like, I think that trickles down to our trades where, maybe there's pressure from us as a general contractor that, hey, this job's tight, the budget's tight, you gave me a price to do tile for, $7,000 and you're telling me it's more money. And yeah, I know we added a niche, but come on, does it really add $500 to the cost? And, so it becomes this, I think that our trades oftentimes avoid asking for money that they're truly owed because we're doing the same with our clients.
Well, I think it's tough. We want to be advocates for the clients and what they're spending. Mm-hmm. So it's not an open checkbook. I use that term all the time. This is an open checkbook. But I do think a lot of our guys that work for us, they want to, production's their biggest thing. So they want to keep things moving. So they'll get guys there and girls there to do stuff, but they've never asked them how much it is. So there's kind of this insinuation that, hey, I'm here, they value me, I can put whatever price tag I want it. So then there's this kind of avoidance of it when just talk about it at the same time. Like it's like I cracked my rim on my truck and had a flat tire and I called to get it fixed, and I remember going, hey, what's this cost, by the way? Because I could buy a new one on eBay for $280. They're like $200. And it's like, well, maybe I don't even need to send it to you. Maybe I'll just get a new one and not deal with it. But so many times where it's like, oh, I'm going to get that gutter replaced. All right, who owns that? Like, do we know how much that costs? No. Well, how is that? That should be hand in hand with the conversation. And why isn't it? Like, I ask guys all the time, hey, if you can't get me an invoice, just shoot me a text. Get me a value.
Yeah. Right.
Get me the backup when the time comes before my invoice goes out, but I need to have it into a rec.
Hold on one sec.
Is that you? Is that me?
It's the Amazon guy.
Get the dogs. But I don't know. I feel like people avoid it, and then they are always about advocating to get guys paid, and it's like, but did you ask for the invoice? Did you ask to get it into the next rec? You have no problem asking me, but now you're putting me in a jam where I value all these guys and girls because we can't do it without them. So, like, people think.
But I think you said it earlier. It comes down to communication. It's the same thing with our trades, and that's what one thing that when I started my company and it was just me, I'd get an invoice from the plumber. I would literally go home and write that check and hand it to him the next day. Every guy, and now it's like now we're looking at it totally different because we're not talking about a couple $1,000s a month. We're talking about a couple $100,000 a month. And it's, I sit down with Nicole and she's like, you can't be funding this job. You literally we just billed the client yesterday and we got an invoice that was 30 days past due for whatever reason. It never got caught in the email or whatever the reason. And they needed it paid immediately. And it's like day one of your new month, you're $7,000, financing.
Yeah.
On a job.
Certain guys that need money right away, and there's other guys that can chill.
Totally, but it's, and that will never change. But what can be avoided here is the confusion by communicating effectively in the front, where it's like, hey, this is how we structure our billing. You know, you're a trade for us. We need our invoices by this date. If you get your invoice by this date, we can guarantee payment by this date because we're billing our client on this date. And, you know, and just having that upfront conversation, because otherwise it's the same thing of not answering, you know, or not following up with an email. It's you're almost waiting for them to reach out and be like, hey, when am I getting my check? And then you answer it on the fly, where it's like, no. If your invoice is in by the 25th, you're guaranteed to have a check by the first of the month, because this is how we run our billing cycle, and it's communicated up front, and it eliminates the question where it's like, well, I sent my invoice on the 27th. Yeah, well, you missed the cutoff date, and you knew that.
To do that for me, because someone will call me and be like, I'm like, all right, I'll cut that. Like, someone needs to take the checks out of my truck, because I literally would be like, all right, I'll cut that right now,
So,
and I'll be like, well, I'll do the math in my head,
John,
and I got
it
it,
was
and I'm like, I'll use my entire credit line and all my profit.
We got rid of all our paper checks. Someone dropped off material in our shop right here yesterday, and was like, you know, we were chatting, and they were walking out. He's like, you know, hey, can I save you a stamp, and I'll just grab a check now? And I'm like, well played. Unfortunately, I don't have any checks. And I was like, everything runs through our accounting department. Once I have the invoice, it kicks to them. You'll get that check, and we have it, and we've set everyone up so they can get e-payment. You want to get paid in 2 days? No problem. Just sign up for this. It goes right into your bank account.
You don't. But even one of the enticing things you always think about working for somebody is a steady paycheck. But talking about this, I mean, a lot of anxiety in being self-employed is ensuring that you have the money to be able to pay all of the overhead and the costs associated with running a business, and then have some left over. But it's not even the inconsistency of knowing what's coming in. It's the inconsistency of knowing what's going out, where even if you had a steady paycheck coming in as a business owner, the uncertainty of when certain bills are going to hit throughout that pay period or throughout the month is the toughest part about it. Where you think, hey, I'm going to work for somebody, I'm just going to get a paycheck month in and month out, where the hardest part about what we do is that you don't know when the bills are going to hit. I mean, you have some that are like clockwork, but the other ones where, depending on how much work has been completed or how many hours are put in by employees or subcontractors, that it's different month to month how much money you owe. It's not like, hey, I have to make this much per month and I get paid this much and then I'm fine and then I'll have some in savings. It's like, well, we had this much in sales this month, but for some reason our expenses were super high, and you need to have the money on hand. You know, maybe in 2 months you're going to be well ahead of the game, but for that month you need to have the money or the cash on hand to be able to pay those expenses.
Yeah, I would like to do twice a month. I know there's some people that do it like, I was talking to someone the other day, and they're like, "Oh,
bill the client twice a month."
Yeah, we bill the client twice a month. Yeah, we do every bi-weekly, and I mean it rolls. And you know, I think honestly, last week when we were on the phone with electrician, it was him and I had a great talk. By the way, after that, he called me, and we did a massive project together that I left, and it was his number on the project was amazing.
Yeah,
and no, but like he was saying, like even in the maybe it was afterwards on a project, he gets paid if his invoice is in the 29th, they get paid before the next 29th. I was like, that's like commercial based, you know, thing. And I'm like, no, I mean, we're trying to do it like if it's the first, it's in our contract, the 1st and 15th of every month is when we'll get budgets out. And then the problem is almost every one of our clients is phenomenal with that. And then you have one that it's production based, cost plus, and you're just cranking, and you find yourself that you're racking up, let's just keep it simple math, $100,000. Now there's $100,000 out. And I think one of the podcasts we did that really stuck with me was Kochman. Kochman, he's like, it took him, 30 plus years to figure out that he can't be funding these projects. And it's like, all right, you know, we have the cabinet shop, and we've structured it that way. Hey, the first installment is shop drawings and all the materials. And then the next one that you get is head of production that covers all our labor. The next one is basically all the paint and all that stuff. And we're at no point in time is it that were covering any of that project. Now it's like, how do I boil that down and not boil it down, but how do I add zeros to all those numbers and make it happen on the construction products? Is I feel like I love.
Well, I think
people.
It goes back to, this cost plus versus fixed cost thing, where it's the cost plus projects, it goes from cost plus to almost like time and material.
Well, I think it's
like
work completed. That makes sense? Like I'm billing for stuff that's complete.
But you're typically adding a lot of scope, and like you said, you're hustling and moving, and it's like you're just racking this stuff up, and then when it goes to bill, it's like going out to a fancy restaurant and getting the receipt, and everyone wants to guess what it's going to be. It's like you're not getting that bill knowing exactly what it's going to cost, and that's where the client is adding add a bunch of zeros to that. It's like, man, how much? Oh, I added all that work this month, and then it goes into this like whirlwind of like thought process that inevitably delays us being paid.
Do you think that's the difference between that and GMP? I think it's just more of the tactic of taking a large deposit. In essence of anything, whether you're dealing with the bank for GMP or you're dealing with a client, it's just how accurate or how much ahead do you get? If it's $1 million project, you take in $100,000, and then are you making sure that before you drain that $100,000 that you've now invoiced? I think that's the gimme. Is a lot of times I'm not taking deposits. We're only doing work that's performed. So at any given time, I am out money because I'm instantly pouring it out, and I'm then receiving money back in. I don't have the slush fund, and we're correcting that with bookkeeping and all that stuff.
So why don't you just take deposits?
That's what we're going to do. It's
we
got to give it back, but
to answer that question, taking a deposit is a complicated accounting process.
How much do you give it back? When do you give it back?
So the way we do it, and this literally took 3 years to figure out, is that we'll take let's use a $100,000 job. We'll take 20% of that job up front. We put that 20% into a separate account. It's our unearned income account. And then each time we start that project and we complete 10% of the job. And so if we complete 10% of the job that first month, we're going to bill 10% complete. But we're going to take 10% of the deposit, and then the remaining has to be funded by the client. So we're taking $2,000 of the deposit from the unearned income, moving it over. Now it's earned, and then the remaining $8,000 we would then bill the client for.
It's tough because the slush fund isn't there for this whole. I mean, I think the deposit to me is really covering that gap.
But it doesn't always work. So what if I order windows? Well,
it's a separate deposit.
It's.
And it's a lead item.
Yes, and specialty items should be separate. But there's going to be months where we might do 30% of the job in a month.
I'm just saying a slush fund.
Now we're
but if
down.
Giving it back, like we give it back over the first 3 invoices, and it's like.
Oh, so we give it back all the way to like at the very end.
That makes sense. It does. So right now, even taking deposits for us,
but the slush fund gets small.
It doesn't work because I like, again, relating it back to me is that if I was billing it. Like when I used to take deposits when I had my own company, I'd take a deposit and then you get lumber dropped, you get dumpster dropped. You'd see where your money went, because I think every story goes along with builders and contractors is that, fly by night, FBN, that they're gonna let the magnets on the truck come off and these guys disappear, girls disappear, and I always wanted to be the 1% that wasn't like that, be the exception, and it's screwing up my business. That's why I need someone to. Let me, like Nick says, I'll be the creative one. Let me have fun with this and put the right teams together and put the right artisans together. But I literally want someone else to be bad cop and just hammer down on all this stuff. If people want invoices paid, then they have to have their stuff in. If they don't, I don't want to be I'm the weakest link of that whole thing.
Right. And I think that's a really good piece of advice, because that's where, that's typically where the money's bled is us, is these emotional decisions that we make, where, when you can remove the emotion from it and just realize that this is business. They hired us to do a job. The fact that we don't want to, Tyler, I can't tell you how many times I think about that stupid pocket door that you installed that she hated. And it's like you did it for free.
Yeah.
Like you upgraded it, and it's like there was never this point of appreciation. And it's, I think every time there's an opportunity where it's like I almost don't, I'm avoiding it. I'm like, just don't bill them, because I'm avoiding having the difficult conversation, or I'm avoiding realizing, like looking at it and trying to figure out how much of it is rework based on bad performance of us versus how much is it that, they asked for additional work.
That's the tough part. If there is a discrepancy between,
Totally.
what's fair to bill and what's not, that's the difficult part. I've actually transitioned more towards, in all my jobs it's a little bit different, but really having a very comprehensive scope up front that is it's integrated into the contract, that spells out everything that we're doing and everything that we're not doing. So I've gotten to the point where in a job, if something comes up that's not within scope and it's extra time on my end, that I just charge them for it. And it's, hey, it's not within the scope of work. This was not. And it's not that everything. Sometimes I'm like, hey, we ran into this. Let's track the time and material on it and see where we end up at the end of the job. Because if they're good customers and I made money on the job, I think it's fair that I don't need to hammer them, or, maybe something down the road winds up being a little bit easier. But on jobs where it is tight, or the customers really wanted to tighten up the budget, and I know that I did that, and I have a comprehensive scope in place, and it's just work that was never included in the scope, never included in my pricing, my billable hours, anything like that, I've just transitioned to having that conversation with them. Hey, this is what we had to do. This is extra. This is how much time I have into it, and this is what I'm going to charge you for it. And I think that I was afraid to do that for a really long time because people don't like that. And the more that I've done it, and I've just matter-of-factly kind of integrated that into my business model, the easier it becomes, and customers typically don't care. And most of them understand, yeah, we understand that wasn't what we intended to do. That was an extra, and it's fair to get paid and compensated for that. But like you said, if it's something that I'm redoing, or even if it, part of it is, hey, part of the scope of this change was already included in the original contract, I can't just bill them for that entire. So then I have to make the moral decision, how much was actually extra work that I didn't anticipate, within the hours of the overall job, and what wasn't. But the more that I've just gotten to the point in my career and my business that I just say, hey, you know what? I didn't anticipate this. I'm not going to do it for free anymore. I'll be honest. It's created so much less anxiety for me, and so much less just angst in general going through a job, understanding that I'm getting fairly compensated for my time, and that I don't have to kind of tiptoe around what was included and what wasn't included. If it's something that I missed in the scope of work, or that, it was an oversight on my end, then yeah, I eat it. But if it's not, if it's something that came up that was unforeseen, that we had no way of knowing, I'm not going to do it for free anymore. And I don't think that we should.
No, and one of the biggest things, especially in bigger projects, is having the right team, like Johnny, you talk about, is having these guys in place communicating this before it gets to a point where, we're making these decisions based on the fact that we didn't communicate.
Yeah, and it can't be after the fact. It's not
right.
And if you kind of have a hunch that something is going to come up, or something is going to be an issue, I think that that's a good time to bring the customers in and kind of open up that conversation. Hey, we have an idea that this may be happening. I don't have a resolution for it yet. Let's keep moving forward and see what happens. But I just want to give you a heads up that this may be the case.
And it's a tricky line right there, Tyler, because some people love to sell fear. And be like, yeah. So there's a very fine line. I hate people that do that. Like, we had this star pattern in the cedar, and they were like, we can't do that. That's going to be like 5-6 extra, hours, 2 guys. And I was like, dude, here's a video on how it's done. This should take an hour. Shut your mouth.
Yeah,
Come on. But they're telling the client that. So it just, for people listening, Tyler, you're 100% right. It's just a casual making someone aware, not like, let me build this thing up so when it crashes down, I can charge more money.
No, exactly, and it's just ensuring that everyone's on the same page and it's communicating. I mean, even yesterday, and John, I reached out to you about this. We had an issue where, long story short, we thought we had leaks. They were leaks from previous times. We did find one current leak, but as soon as I found them, I'd take an hour to kind of collect my thoughts and go through every circumstance and situation as to how this could go. And then at the end of the day, I bring the customers in. We discuss what's going on, what I think, what potentially could be the fixes, how we're going to move forward. And then we start opening things up the next day and find where the majority of the water is coming in, and it's not as big of an issue as we thought. And then in that situation, there's good faith there, right? Because you gave them, hey, it could be this, it could be this, and it could be really bad, and then you're not taking advantage of them because the fix, it was a best case scenario, and we fixed it for a minimal amount of money. And so you can't always sell the fear, and it's not good practice. And if you're always selling that fear and then hitting them with all that you have, obviously it's going to leave people with a bad taste in your mouth. But if you do communicate that properly and they understand that there's potentially, there's potential for things to cost a lot of money, and then you come back and you open things up and find out, hey, we have an easier fix for this and it's not going to cost you that much money. I think that it looks good for you, and it's good faith, and that's the way that things should be done.
It's also, I think about, we have a recent scenario where, we were put in a position where we were told to order something, ahead of going through the submittal process. Get ahead of it, order this. We met in a meeting. This is what I want. We ordered it. And then we got an email a couple weeks later, like, just to recap, this is what I want. It was a door. This is what the door should look like. No. And we were like, nope, that's not what was ordered. We discussed that. Well, that's not my understanding. So
we started putting that in our weekly, daily updates on Build a Trend.
Yeah, well,
just because it was like,
and it was so, we never do that. We go through the formal submittal process always, and we were instructed to do it. And then we had a second scenario where we built it to the drawings, and they changed something on the drawing, and there was a note on the drawing about a beam being flush in the structural drawing, but it had a coffer in the architectural, so the beam didn't have to be flush, and it didn't fit flush. But it was never brought up because there was a coffer there. It didn't impact the job, and unfortunately, the client disagreed with us. And it comes down to the good faith thing, Tyler. It's like I removed myself from the situation. I instructed my project manager to walk them through it and get hey, just get them to understand that we built it to the drawing. And unfortunately, it escalated to a point where I was copied on an email, and it's that's where that emotional side comes in, or the business decision comes in of, all right, we're at a point in this where the client disagrees with us enough that this could shake the relationship for the job, and at the end of the day, we're talking about $1,100, and it's like and that's where I think that is something that we've kind of glazed over, is that there are times that we have to offer these concessions for the sake of client satisfaction, which is frustrating because ultimately the way that would have been prevented is if we did a better job communicating, which, hey, let's take that as a lesson learned and realize that particular situation, we made the best decision based on what we were expecting to do, not expecting that they would change something. But if the water's turning, murky because, we're trying to stomp our foot down and say, no, you have to pay. It's like, all right, well, let's look at the big picture here.
It's a short-term fix because you're gonna have to get
correct.
A final check, and they might pay you then, but they're just adding interest to that sumbitch, and at the end they're gonna try and nickel and dime you for your final invoice, on the same way.
And right, and it's and then so it's the conversation internally. It's like, listen, this is the position we're in. So going forward, now we know that any changes have to be reviewed. Any product that we order has to be reviewed and approved, because the two we have two concessions on this job, and they're because that we didn't follow our typical protocol because we were asked to do something atypical.
Well,
and then now we're now paying.
You know what's
for.
crazy about that is that like we had a situation like that in one of our projects, steel beam, same exact thing, Nick, where there was a coffer, blah blah, and it was more of, again, you pay good money for architecture drawings, okay? So you want
that. Yeah, that was my argument.
So there's a moment where you're like, all right, you paid a professional to draw these up, and these are gospel, these are the Bible. This is what we're going to go off of, and we're going to create this space to that point. And to the same point that an architect said to me, stay in my lane, I can't, for this exact reason, is that, hey, let me look at that beam. That beam's this size. This isn't going to work because I don't know who drew that design. I don't know who drew that page that day.
Right.
And if assumptions were made.
Right.
And then, so it's more of, and again.
And it's not our job. I mean, if you want to play whose job is who, it's not our job for us to take the architectural and coordinate with the structural if the structural and the architect are working.
The assumption is that that's already been done. That's been met in that.
And it's so, and the argument at the time, it's the structural drawing is sizing and telling us what size beams and so on and so forth. The fact that there was a note, it was a 21-inch tall LVL, and it was instructed for us to install that flush with the ceiling. And I was like, does anyone else know of a home that has a 21-inch floor joist?
But that's the flag. So I mean, that weekly meeting is what we brought up, was like, hey, John was like, I'm like, what's going on with that steel? He's like, there's a coffer. I'm like, are we sure? Like, just it's really, I think our job is to confirm and understand what was boilerplate and what was just placed in the spaces, where everyone wants to lean towards, hey, get as much done in pre-con as possible. I trust none of it. Have you sat down and take a 3-hour test before? You're just basically just circling bubbles and trying to say your name in the test. And it's like, no, I just feel like we should reiterate stuff. If that pre-con's been a year, our job is, whether it's with the architect, we started with the architect. We get, hey, what do you want to do with this beam? Is this coffer really going in? Because when I build it up and I put wood around this steel beam, the coffer's going to be significant. And they're like, no. What did they say? They said, put it up. We're gonna raise the floor of the master bath that we just added in. And I was like, we're already putting floor heat in. Like, it's already going to be a step up. And I hate thresholds in any project because, in my opinion, our job should make it smooth. And they're like, yeah, do this. And even still there, Nick, I was like, turning to John, I'm like, no, I don't believe. I think someone never talked to the client and had this debate, and it should be up to them to make this decision. Told John, I go, hey, touch base with him. And he's like, no, leave that low, keep the ceiling, make it as flush to the plywood as possible, and so that coffer is as small as possible. And it's just having those little comments and discussions along the way. I think we are the gray area in the build. And just to make sure. And then we put the steel where we finally rested, but it wasn't per the drawing, and it wasn't per what the architect told us. It was really us presenting that option. That's what Matt Sargent told me a number of years ago, was present all the options. And then it's up to them, and then document it. And that, again, that daily update, putting that in there going, hey, Mike went over this, beam's going to go flush with that plywood, boom, boom, boom. It's in there. So that is basically my notebook. The daily log has become my notebook. Yeah. And we keep adding this template to it for approvals. Like, hey, order these 6 windows for $7,000. Today at this meeting, we told so-and-so told us to order these. That way it's in there. So when they come 14 to 18 weeks away, no one forgets. But I mean, it's just, I think avoidance. I think a lot of our guys avoid stuff where it's, whether it's client based or whatever, it's really tough. Well, even with us, they avoid telling us certain things because they don't know how we're going to react. Did this get done? Yeah, no, it got done. I'm like, I tilt my head like a dog. Did it? Just tell me if I need to help. I think that's the hardest part for. It was when Tyler, you were telling that story about, the numbers and how to. I was thinking about it going how I do it now, owning a business and how I've owned businesses. When I was a PM for a number of years, it was so much easier.
Oh,
it was like, oh, that's a miss. Hey guys, there's a miss here, and I'd have so much fun with it because it would be like, hey, the estimator missed it. We got to pick it up somewhere. So and at the same time, when we did do some of those, it wasn't cost plus. It was like lump sum. Like you'd be able to buy out demo. Like what we do now, I can't buy anything out. If I do demo and it comes in cheaper, the client in that bill cycle only pays the cheapest number because we have backup with it. So you can't find any contingency. They reap the benefit right then and there. But back in the day, it's like I'd do my own demo. I'd save $6,000, and now there's $6,000. So if that does come up with the windows, Tyler, with the stucco, I have $6,000 of slush to play with on that project.
Yeah.
But the way we do it now, it's evaporated right away.
And this is I know we're short on time today, but
it's my last week of lacrosse.
I know, but would you ever switch back to a lump sum?
But the problem is the fluff would have to be so big.
That understood, but let's just my question: would you switch to a lump sum?
Honestly, no.
There's nothing enticing about it.
I'd rather be completely transparent. What's the enticing part for you?
The enticing part is to be able to buy out or have built-in contingency and thus be.
But how are you buying it out? What are you substituting? Quality, speed.
No,
but that's the thing.
Not necessarily.
Is when you're buying stuff out, you're taking a chance on a certain sub that. Like right now, I have 4 demo numbers for a project.
Okay, all right. Let me flip the other way. Then you don't buy it out. You price it out with all your top A+ guys, and you add 35% to it.
35%. That might make the product not feasible. So I'm saying right now we're doing a project. We have a demo number for a house. I got 3 numbers: 38,000, 58,000, 69,000. I highlight the low one. This is how I was testing my client because they're new to me. And I was like, hey, these are the numbers, blah, blah. He goes, well, we have to throw out the bottom one.
You review all 3 numbers with the client? You're presenting all 3 numbers to the client? I'm
presenting the options going, hey, this is what we have, the names, quotes, everything going, hey, how do you want to proceed? This is the lowest number. This is a referral. These guys have had experience with, blah, blah. And he's like, bottom one's not going to perform. I go, I even double-checked how much manpower, dumpsters are included, how long is it going to take? Because the cheaper number, instead of being 3 weeks, could be 8 weeks. So you're not making any money back that way. And he's like, throw that one out. Here's one more guy I want you to check in on. Called them. They walked it to validate the top 2 numbers to see where they're at. So, I love that process. I'll take that over if it's the other way, Nick, and it's a PM running that job. The PM all day goes to the cheap guy. And then I can't.
I guess I didn't mean it. I didn't really mean it in the sense of buying it out like that. And I know that's the way I said it.
That's how I did it back in the day. If it was small enough, I would do the demo myself. Have some buddies come in the weekend.
Totally.
But let's say
I just think our industry makes. I just don't think our industry is valued enough. And I get the argument that it might not be a feasible job, and we want to help out everyone. But I just really believe that us as builders and what we do in this industry, that the general rule of thumb of how much money we mark up projects is just too little.
I agree with you, and I think the problem is if you're gonna mark up a premium, you absolutely have to bring the service, experience, and everything else. And I think 1,000%. My team right now, what we're charging is exactly what we should be with the team we're bringing.
But okay. But as you grow and these guys become refined and they become the Navy SEALs version of themselves, how do you?
I hope that the margins increase
you approach
at the same time,
right? But with that transparency, I'm not saying you can't sell it, because I feel like I've done it in scenarios where I've been able to sell the transparent premium, cost plus version. But I still look at it as there's still room to grow, and I'm already in getting into a market where it's being questioned that why is our fee so high?
It all depends. Like there's some products where if it's a new construction, I'm not going to put 18%. I have a separate management number, but like you go above 18% on new construction, it's like I could charge more. I get it, but I don't. At this moment, with the other products we have on tap, I don't need to make more than that. I don't want to be greedy because I think there's a portion there where
I don't think it's about, in my opinion, it's not about the greed. It's about, like, for us, I look at it as, well, I want the opportunity to take our time with it.
Well, that's different. I mean, you could, with the cost plus scenario, like this project we're starting, it's $3.5 million. It's like, hey, we don't even have the drawings yet. Unbelievable architect, all this stuff. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to staff this with. Just being up front and going, this is what I'm going to lock in this fee with you. So we're literally writing a contract that has no values in it. It's just whatever scope we decide to do, this is the fee we're adding onto it. And management, depending on if you're grabbing tile from Italy, you're doing this wine cellar, I might need to have staff here that we'll talk about, whether it's a PM, super, whatever else, that's not in question, Nick. That's never in question. If I need to take time.
No, I know, but if you, like, let's look at it like you mark 18%, and if that, say it's $1 million job, just for sake, right? You mark it up 18%. If that job's an 8-month job, that's fine. That 18% is X amount, right, of dollars. I guess $180,000, right? And that, and that $180,000 is divided by the months because it's covering your overhead. But you decide that job needs to take 12 months or 16 months because that's what it's going to take to really refine this thing to that level. That $180,000 gets spread out, even further, thus requiring you to take on additional work to then cover the overhead.
Well, that's different. Yeah.
It's this like, multiple glass, like keeping everything, balanced.
Well, I think it's that experience that the scope goes off reservation and more time has to go into it, depending on weather and stuff like that. I'm with you. Ideally, you're never compromise. I think that's the overall goal, even without the margins being higher. I feel like you look at like cell phones and sneakers and all that, and the margins are ridiculous. And yeah, I'd love to see that, but at the same token, they're not putting this many systems and materials in place, even cars. Like the components of all those things we're talking about that have massive margins, they're not even close to what we're doing.
No, it's also in a controlled environment.
Yeah. Roof over their head. And I don't know. It's just tough. Nick, I'm with you. I just don't know if the lump sum solves it. I think the lump sum puts it even more in your court. And you have to, like going back to the demo part, any PM would go, I'll overmanage that. I'll overmanage. But you could be the start of that project and you may have saved yourself $30K, but it may be completely off timeline. And say, hey, like the architect today, I'm like, hey, if I do asbestos, I have 10 days, we do demo, we're 6 weeks out. You don't need to squeeze to get your drawings done for this next 2-week window to have approvals. You have 4 weeks. But if this takes 9 months at that point and these guys busted their ass to get all the drawings done, dude, my reputation for this project is ruined between designer, architect, client for what? For $30K? I'd rather just do it this way, say, hey, this is where I'm at. They know where it's at. They made the decision with me, and now we're all on the same page.
And I agree. It's not, I don't think lump sum is the solution. What it comes down to is whether you're going to sit with a client and sell them on a higher fee or sell them on the fact that, it's the lump sum is higher than someone else. Like, at the end of the day, you're doing the same thing. You are talking about the value. And to your point, you need to be able to deliver and execute on that.
Yeah, we just locked in a fee with the client. We just said, hey, we'll do cost plus on all the materials, but the fee we have in there, they added about 15 to 20K to our fee, not management, just our fee. And they said, hey, let's lock that into the contract. I said, no problem. So instead of 140K, it's 164,000 is what we're going to lock in to kind of cover anything that goes above and beyond. And I'm like, totally fine with that.
So it's a fixed fee,
I was thinking about this the other day, and obviously my business structure is much different than what you guys are doing, and there's a many more factors involved. But also for me, it's probably applicable to more people, because I would assume that more companies are structured small like me than growing bigger and having multiple employees. It's just the state of our industry in the country. But I've tried so many ways over the years to find a way to sell what I'm doing and bring value to my customers, and whether it's through design first, whether it's through the way that I'm billing, whether it's through execution. And I've come to the realization, and I'm lucky to have this to establish myself to be able to do this, but it really shouldn't matter the way that I structure my business or how we're going to charge. Obviously, you want your price point's going to be your price point, but whether I want to charge you lump sum, whether I want to charge you time and material, the goal is for that number to be the same, right? Whether it's lump sum, time, and material.
Exactly.
And I've realized that I just, I shouldn't be worried about so much about bringing things to the table that my customers are going to love, whether it's helping them with design, whether it's, the way that I'm billing and everything else, as much as just selling what I'm doing. And it should be less about being appealing on those other ends as much as, hey, we can execute on this level, we can protect at this level, we can ensure that you can live through this renovation with your entire family, being, health conscious and ensuring the safety and protection of your family, and also executing at a very high level. That should be what I'm selling, and that should be my value to customers. It shouldn't be how I'm billing them. Obviously, I'm structured different than you guys, but I am at a point now where I can kind of say, hey, this is what we do, this is the process. And I think as a consumer myself that those are the customers that I want. If I went to somebody and was looking for their expertise, and how they're billing me isn't my biggest concern, I would go to that person because of their talent, because of referrals, because of other people's experience, because I like their style, because I like their design. And I think that, if our industry were closer to that, where people were hiring Nick because they like Nick's ability to execute a more streamlined, contemporary, modern design, or they went to John because they like the way that your projects have a very traditional feel, but you're also putting your own flair and adding some rustic appeal to these houses, but ensuring that you're kind of being a steward for the traditional style homes, and weren't so worried about the structure of how your business, that our industry would be in a better place as well. Because everyone's so worried about, well, so-and-so is going to do this and they're going to charge me this much and their percentage is here. And, it's what happens when our business is it's cost driven, and that it's a commodity at that point. But it's most industries, people are going and getting things because that's what they want and that's who they want, and it's not necessarily how they're structuring the financial end of their business.
Well, I look at it like you go buy a car, you know what you're getting into.
Exactly.
You don't go buy the car and then they build it and then they charge you an extra $25K at the end. I feel like that's what most clients are worried about, is that everyone's told them it's going to cost more, they're going to be over budget. So almost every one of our clients is like, what's the reality of this budget? Like, I know we're putting it on paper using past history, blah, blah, because I am very against pricing projects out ahead of time. Because how many of you guys like pricing projects right now?
No, and that's what it is. It's so you're essentially, you have customers coming to you because they've seen what you've done. They've walked your project. They've spoken to your customers, and there's a level of trust there. And they should be hiring you regardless of whether you want to charge them time and material, you want to, base your contract on lump sum, you want it to be cost plus, because at the end of the day, we should be working towards that number being the same across the board. We're trying to balance what's fair to us and what's fair to our customer, and trying to get them to sign up where everyone's getting the best of every situation, and if everyone were honest and everyone were upfront, that shouldn't be so much of a concern. The problem is that there's a stigma in our industry, and there's a lot of guys and girls out there who aren't necessarily fair with their customers and are looking to maximize their profit rather than, you know, maximizing the value that they're bringing customers. But you're in the position to be having people hiring you before they've seen a number, and I think that for those who have been able to position themselves to do that, it's a luxury, and it's not necessarily indicative of the rest of our industry, but it should be working towards that.
I'm 100% with you. That's perfectly put.
I mean, somebody should be hiring Nick because Nick can do things that I can't do.
Yeah.
You know, they should be hiring you because of what your strong suits are and what they like about you, and we should all be. You know, the profit shouldn't, the margin shouldn't be that much different if people are structured the same and the pay rates are the same and the execution is the same. The margin shouldn't be that much different unless somebody's price gouging.
Yeah.
Or somebody just has a massive overhead that they're looking to front. But it should be pretty straight across the board. There's going to be people who perform at a higher level who cost more money because it takes more time and they use nicer materials, and there's going to be people who are going to be a lower price because it's faster. They're using a lower quality material that costs less money, and they can get in and out quicker. And once you go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and it's important for the client to understand that.
Agreed.
You know, we just, you know, I think John, that project we talked about a couple weeks ago, we ended up not getting the job, but the client called me and said, listen, you know, you were the most detailed proposal. You clearly understood the scope of the work. You were, I think we were like literally $2 million off the guy in the middle. Which, no, it's insane. No, it was $2 million. 2K. And, you know,
it's only $1 million job.
But he...
Yeah, breeze over the whole thing.
We priced the job at $8 million. There was a guy that came in at $5 million and a guy that came in at $6 million, and so we were way off. But we were looking at it in a very different way than anyone else. Like the scope wasn't defined. It was early on. It was very preliminary. And I chatted with the client and I explained. I'm like, these are the considerations that we made. You're at like the level of detail and what this house is designed like is, in my opinion, you're asking for a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, and you're not going to build what the guy at 6 was thinking in his head.
100% not. And it was the best conversation because he stopped me and he said, listen, I actually really appreciate this because I know how you guys would execute, and I've seen your work, and it would really be, you would approach it in more of an artistic fashion. I just don't value that enough to pay that money,
and that's fair.
And I know I'm going to get a lesser product, but that's just the reality of it. And I said, listen, that by far is like that's what I wanted to hear, and because I now understand that you understand where we're coming from and appreciated what we were doing, but it just wasn't important to you. It was more important to get more house for less dollars.
You should have been like,
then we're not the right bet.
Can you send me that proposal that you approved so I can buzz through it?
You have it.
Not you. I'm saying you talking to that client going, hey, you mind sending me those other 2 proposals? Because I'd like to kind of see where I
did ask for them.
That's like the best move when you get one of those. I returned the favor.
I asked the architect.
Hey, here's this bid.
Yeah. Yeah, I asked the architect, and he was like, that's pointless. One guy wrote an email and just wrote $5.2 million. No, nothing else. Hey, project, $5.2 million. And the other one was, line item, but not very detailed. He's like, you put a lot of time into it. I'm like, yeah, it's a job I wanted. It was a really cool project, but it's not a $6 million house.
Which it's and that's not just on the homeowners as well. Like you said, the homeowners should understand the difference of that. That's on us as well to understand who we are and what we want to do, and understand going into those situations. Do we have a fair shot at this or not? Because there's a lot of jobs that you don't have a fair shot at, and because you're overbuilding, because that's your brand and that's what you want, and that's not on the customers to fund your vision.
And at the end of the day, could I have built that house for $6 million? Yes. But not the house that I want to build. John, I know you're taking off, dude. Go enjoy your last day of lacrosse. All right.
Awesome, boys. Great conversation. Keep it rolling.
Thanks, man. Yeah, that's there is, you have to delineate between what you want on a project and what your customers want, and that goes back to,
and does that align?
Yeah, right. And that goes back to saying that I want the customers who come to me because they already understand and they already know, and maybe they find out that they can't afford that, but at least you have a fair shot at that point. If you have somebody who doesn't understand what you do versus what somebody else does, it's tough, to land those jobs. You're not bringing anything to the table that's of value to them, or that they value highly enough to hire you even when you're more money.
Right.
And for me, that's what I try and focus on when I'm speaking with customers. And a lot of times I know that I'm probably turning off customers that, again, like you said, I could do the job for the price that they want to do the job. Is it what I want to be doing, or am I really building, designing, executing to my full potential? No, and that's what I want to do. So my job is to kind of find those customers that do want that and allow me to do that. And at that point, for me, it's a win for me personally. It's a win for me on a business level. My customers are getting what they want. They're happy. They're paying for that premium that they actually believe in and find value in. And it works for everyone. It obviously doesn't work when somebody pays a premium and they don't understand what they're getting, and they may not actually see value in that project because they just can't distinguish between what you do and what somebody else does because they're not that well versed in it.
Right.
They don't appreciate the fine details. They don't appreciate the cleanliness. They don't appreciate the design, the vision, the process. And you won't ever justify that cost to them. They won't ever see it. And that's not right or wrong, but you're setting yourself up to fail if you're pursuing those type of projects. You really should be pursuing the type of projects that are a good fit for you and your company and for what you have the ability to do or what you want to be doing.
Right.
I mean, you could chase every job and every lead that comes in. You could tell everyone yes. There's people.
I've been there.
Yeah, and
and that's. Sorry, I cut you off, but that's exactly where this time last year we had this. I had this correction where we went through some difficult projects, and I had to sit back and realize that I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. And the sooner that, and oftentimes people will say it, you get into this habit of feeding the machine. Tyler, you've said it to me, Johnny, it's like, don't get there. And and oftentimes you get into a funk like that, or go down, you take a hard left, not realizing that you're not focused on what your end goal is, and you're taking on projects for different reasons. And the sooner you can either correct that or even prevent that, the better. Especially now where everyone's like, I'm so busy, I have so much work. It's like, well, look at the work you're doing. Do all of those projects actually check all the boxes?
Yeah.
And not to, and I don't want this to come off as like a weird flex, but it's like, that's really been our focus, is like looking at things and saying, if this doesn't check every box, then let's say no to it. And that's frightening. And I know people are listening to this saying, I can't say no to work. I can't afford to do it. And I'm not saying that you should say no if you literally don't have the means to get another job. But I think that should always be in the back of your mind. Look for the projects that check as many boxes as possible. What's important to you? It's
also not fair to your customers, right? If you're entertaining every lead and somebody's coming to you and they don't understand and they don't grasp the full capacity of what you do, and then they hire you and they're paying a premium for you to be doing work that's not necessarily in line with what you want to be doing, you're not helping them out. If they didn't hire you because they just want you to be doing that work, they could probably save some money and go with somebody else who's going to give them everything that they want and more, and not have to kind of float that financial premium to have you on board. So a lot of times, it's not a lot of jobs that come across my plate that I don't want to be doing and don't fit the budget. It's not just because selfishly I'm saying, hey, I'm above that. It's just a lot of times it doesn't make sense for you to pay what we would charge when you could find somebody that's going to be closer to your price point, and they're going to check the boxes for you. And that right. By you saying yes, or you entertaining that, or you kind of dragging them on when you understand that you're not the best fit in the first place, but hey, I can make money on this job, or it's a good job financially for me. It's going to be easier. I'll make more money on this than my other jobs. It's not necessarily fair to them at that point. And I know that we're in business to make money. But I also think that that's a big issue within our industry, that everyone, for so many guys and girls, growth is because there's more coming across their plate, and there's more on their plate than has been before. So they say, I can't do it all. I'm going to hire more people. I'm going to put more people in trucks, and they're going to expand the business when it's a financial decision, which obviously plays a large role in why you expand a business. But I think that it's more important to focus on expanding and still kind of hitting business on the level that you want to be hitting, rather than just saying, I'm going to put more people in place so that the customers that are calling me, they can stay with me and I can make them happy. Because I think that overall you'd probably have a higher percentage of happy customers if you worked with a controlled, reasonable amount of customers, and you really found who was your client and your clientele and demographic, and really focused on what's best for you and your customer, rather than just putting people in place and getting them to the job and putting more people in trucks.
100%.
It's tough though. And I think a lot of times you kind of have to try that and explore and go down that road to see if it works for you, if you can maintain that growth, if you can sustain the size and the scale of doing things on that level. If you're happy doing that, if your customers are happy, if your family's happy, if financially you can float that, there's a lot to it than just, hey, my phone's ringing off the hook. I could make more money if I hired more people. There's a lot more to it than that, and it's not quite that simple.
No, and that's, like I said, that's really been our focus, is truly going after projects and aligning ourselves with projects that we are excited about. And, and that's that $8 million project I mentioned. It's, to go into that knowing we were going to be over budget, and then hearing that, we were $2 million from the other person, I could have relooked at that and said, I can do that for $6 million. Yeah. But it's, I would have had to sacrifice things in order for it to fit. And then I went through this at the beginning of COVID. It was the same exact thing. We got a project, and we got really far down the road, really far down the design and pre-construction side, where they inevitably ended up deciding to cancel the job because, we, despite actually hitting the numbers that we communicated that we hit, we were actually under our budget. They just decided that we were making it too complicated, and again, they didn't value the detail work that we were putting into it. And for that reason, they decided to find someone else that could build something more typical.
Yeah.
And and at the end of the day, if that's what they value, then why, and we've already done our due diligence of trying to sell them on building a better house, and they don't value that, then we're wasting our time and effort into trying to sell something that a client doesn't, see the value in.
Yeah, and they also would be in a better position. They don't need that, realistically.
Right. Exactly.
And they would be fine that job that's at the lower price point, and to sell them on something more than they need. While it may work, the numbers may work out. You're not really advocating properly for that customer. At that point, I think having the conversation where, like you did, and hey, I think that you guys are going to be fine with this person, rather than trying to kind of force your will on them or impose your will on them, is the right move. And I think that's one good thing with everyone being busy, right? Is that you're not starving for work. You're not hungry for work. And hopefully you can point people in the right direction or set them up to be able to kind of find somebody that suits them a little bit better than forcing a fit that isn't really the right thing from day one, because it turns out to be a nightmare for everyone.
Exactly.
I mean, I just had a customer who I've worked for a ton over the past couple years, and they want to get me over there for a project that's not really up my alley. They want to put like a screened-in porch off the back of their house. And it would be a nice project, a lot of carpentry on it, but that's just not a lot of what we do. And they want it soon because everything's still happening with COVID. Life hasn't gone back to normal. They want to be able to spend time out back, and they're trying to basically get me over there however they can. And I can't commit to anything, and I can't give them a timeline. And they basically were like, hey, I think that we're going to have to kind of start interviewing people and getting people over for estimates to do this project if you don't think that you can get to us in a reasonable amount of time.
Right.
And I just didn't fight it. I'm not going to try and force that. And it's basically, hey, good luck. Find somebody that kind of hits. Right now, you don't value what I do enough and the quality of work that we did enough to wait for us to get over there.
Right.
And, hopefully that doesn't come back to bite them in the butt, because I know that when we were there, they were so grateful of what we were doing, and they had bad experiences before, and they kind of vouched that this is going to be the path that they would take moving forward. And they still said, for like the upcoming kitchen and the rest of the first floor renovation, you're the route we want to go. And we've established ourselves, but there's something that's more pressing right now than what we put on the table, and that's time. Timeline
Right.
for them is more important than anything else. So don't hire me for my timeline, because we're not going to be the quickest one to turn a project around. So yeah, go find somebody who's a better fit for you that can hit or come closer to your timeline than I can.
Right.
And hopefully that works out, and the quality is okay, and the budget is okay, and the timeline makes all of that better for you. That's just like a classic case of something not being a fit, and the fit right there for me is just that I can't turn it around that quickly. And that's there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't know, in the past, like you said, I try and force that, or I try and get somebody to frame it, and then I'll trim it and make my life more complicated than it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, dude, I have forced so many projects into this business, and even from a sales perspective, last year when COVID happened, I remember that, like, looking at work and being super aggressive with trying to make it work and numbers work, and getting some to sign and getting others not like couldn't get them to work, even though I knew they weren't a good fit. And I remember just having this like realization sitting at the kitchen table, or not kitchen island. I was like, man, I'm doing stuff that I don't enjoy, and I'm putting myself in a position where I just don't enjoy this.
Yeah.
And that was so scary to me. And I remember sitting down with a couple of my guys and just being like, hey, this is where my mind has been, and this is where I want my mind to go. And, I'm not going to be able to do this alone. So, who's in? And, it's just been really, from there, it's been, all right, let's really, really focus on, who we want to be, and and focus on the parts that it's going to take to get there.
It's interesting because oftentimes you don't realize that you're doing that until you're so far down that road where you kind of have a realization as to what's going on. And then at that point, you can see how you got there. But throughout all of that, it's because you had one job fall through that opened up a slot in your schedule, or, you brought on 2 more people that you need to keep busy, or your finances were tight the month before. You had to buy a new vehicle and you wanted to take on an extra job to kind of foot that bill. And it's all of these little things that come together and add up. And all of a sudden you're like, holy crap, I have 18 months of work lined up ahead of me. That's nothing I want to be doing just because I'm trying to support this business and this lifestyle that is not actually what I want, but it's grown to what it is just organically because of one small bad decision after another.
Yeah. It's, and I don't want to diminish the fact, again, that it's not always that easy. It's, right now I feel like everyone keeps talking about how busy they are, and I think the piece of advice is to be selective and really consider, all the parts and pieces to it. But, there's no doubt that not everyone has that luxury. But, even in those early days, you really do need to consider, are you taking on the right work? Are you marketing yourself the right way? Are you communicating the things that you want in order to get to what your quote-unquote end goal might be? Even if it's a 12-month or 6-month goal, it's are you taking the steps necessary? And yes, you might have to do some shit jobs in the beginning, but always be moving in a forward momentum.
Yeah, and you have to understand why people are hiring you.
Right.
And even early on, that may be because you're cheap. It may be because you're willing to do that bathroom, without pulling permits or without getting a plumber and electrician. That may be why you're getting hired on certain jobs. It may be because, you're just good enough at that point. If you're not okay with that and that's not where you want to be, then you have to figure out how to get where you want to be and, use all of those jobs as stepping stones to kind of build up your portfolio and build up your career and move towards where you want to be. But you have to understand every customer is going to hire you for a reason. It's going to be because somebody referred you and they spoke highly of you, because somebody referred you and they said that, you were the cheapest out of the 4 guys that they interviewed, because you fly under the radar, because your work was okay, but your price was good. It doesn't matter. Everyone's going to hire you for a reason. And if your goal is to get to the point where people are hiring you because they truly believe that you're the best at what you do and that you're going to give them the most well-executed, well thought out, cleanest project, then figure out how you have to do that. And it may cost you some headaches and it may cost you some time and some money and everything else, but you can get there. You just have to understand where you are at any given moment, and kind of why everyone's coming to you, and then figure out how to kind of adapt and shape your company that people are now hiring you for the better reasons that you want. Like Nick, you wanted to build houses and you realized that people were coming to you looking for these little projects. And why were they looking to you for these little projects? Because that's how you were marketing your company. They didn't understand where you wanted to be. So you had to basically, portray yourself as what you wanted to be doing. And then the people are going to be hiring you for that.
Right.
But you're not going to get that. You're not going to get there without understanding, hey, why do people keep calling me for just cabinet jobs? Well, because maybe it looks like that's all you do.
It's very true. It's like we've had this conversation on the podcast, and and even off the podcast. That's what was happening. Is like we were marketing ourselves as someone very differently than we wanted to be. We were so focused on what we have been in the past and talking about that, and I think, Tyler, you make a great point. It's like you have to portray yourself in what you want to be, but an important note is in an honest way.
Yeah.
In an honest, You're not faking it. You're not pretending that you've done something that you haven't. It's, that $8 million build I'm talking about, the client also was the only client to ever, ask me very directly or say very directly to me that you've never built anything like this. And I said, you're absolutely right. And we can address that elephant in the room, because for what I might lack in experience, I'm going to make up in other areas.
Yeah.
Because this is something that I want to be doing. This is the trajectory that I want to be taking. And, I'm never going to build my first one until I build my first one.
Yep.
And, and at the time, it came down to the value and the cost, but he had, before we had got to that point, he was like, I value that. I appreciate that. That weighs no negative feelings in the decision making. And he repeated that later on, and it just came, like I said, it came down to the cost and what he felt as though was a value to him.
Yeah, and like you said, it can't be smoke and mirrors. It has to be an accurate portrayal of who you are, what you've done, where you want to be,
Right.
And you have to be honest. I think it's so important in business, and it may not be the best business move ever, but to be an honest person, because while you may not make as much of a profit margin on each and every job, you will have longevity,
Totally.
because people will continue to come back. So you'll make up for it for years and years and years.
We got Trent Presler next week.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so he his book came out in April, Little and Often, and it talks about building his first canoe using humble ranch tools that he inherited from his dad, who passed away in 2014. I thought that was his full-time job for a while. He owns like a winery.
Really?
Yeah.
Sounds like a cool job. Probably until
So-
you own a winery, then you're like, this is a pain in the butt.
Yeah, we're probably going to talk about it. He's like, yeah, that job sucks.
Yeah.
But if you guys haven't checked him out, I would recommend doing so before next week. Trent Presler Woodshop on Instagram. He has built some absolutely amazing canoes and has done a great job documenting the process. Yeah.
Cool. Next week.
We'll see you guys next week. As always, you guys know where to find us on Instagram. You want to leave us some feedback, hit that survey monkey if we're doing a good job. Make sure you keep us in the #1 spot for construction podcasts on all our podcast apps. And do us a favor, drop us a review. We definitely still read them. We don't always read them on air, but if we have a good one, we will do so. And as always, this podcast is brought to you by Duration Moulding and Millwork. In a world of ever-changing or ever-increasing lead times and escalating pricing, how about a product that gives you neither? That's right. Even completely custom molding profiles are produced in just 2 weeks from Duration. And as other molding and siding product line prices increase and march upward, Durations remain the same. Get exactly what you want quickly, efficiently, and cost-effectively. To learn more about Duration Poly Ash products, please visit their website at durationmillwork.com. And be sure to check them out on IG.